We are here with Steve Milton with Milton Property Inspections today to talk about Home Inspections 101. So Steve, just I guess start off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
First, thanks for having me, Matt. Happy to be here. I'm an experienced inspector. Been inspecting homes now for about 11 years, and doing septic inspections for about 5, 6 years now. So I have a background in the construction industry, which sort of got me thinking of getting into the home inspection business years ago. Former building operator manager at Fairmont Châtellerault Hotel. Well, I talked about being a septic inspector. So sort of a brief background on my experience and kind of what got me into the home inspection industry.
Perfect. So I guess what is a home inspection and what's involved?
So what a home inspection is, it is a visual inspection of the home's structure and systems. What it's meant to do is help identify any issues before purchase, or if you're doing a pre-list, kind of getting ahead of those issues before your potential buyer's inspector goes through, just so you know where you're at with things. You can choose to either correct them or just simply be aware for negotiating purposes, or like I said, just getting rid of that list. So less to do before moving, and then it's just a better understanding of the property's condition. So no home is perfect, not even new ones. The older it is, sometimes the more challenging things can be if we have barns and outbuildings and so on. So every property is different. But just sort of the idea of the home inspection is to get a bit more of a understanding of the property's condition.
Perfect. And so what does a home inspection cover? What's involved?
Yeah,
What
so
are you
super
looking at?
important. Yeah, exactly. Super important. There's a lot of misconceptions I find. So what I like to try to do with my clients is sort of get ahead of that and sort of set expectations. So a home inspection is going to cover the structure, foundation, walls, roofs, attic, exterior. So everything on the exterior, roofing, of course, shingles, gutters, chimneys, plumbing throughout the home, throughout the property, electrical. So electrical is, as we know, nothing to mess around with. It can lead to very expensive repairs or potential fire hazards. So electrical is a big thing that we as home inspectors are looking for. HVAC, of course, it's minus 20 out here today. We want our HVAC in working order. And interiors. So, that could be everything from, ceilings, walls, floors, stairs, appliances. That not something that we typically cover as home inspection. It's not in our standards of practice. But, if it's looking quite dated and been around from the 50s, we're going to point that out, that you're probably going to be into some new appliances pretty soon. So that's sort of what it kind of.
Perfect. And so with all this happening, are we expecting buyers to basically write things down on their own? How do you typically deliver this information to a buyer or to whoever's getting the home inspection done?
Yeah, exactly. So everyone I find has different, different. A lot of my clients have different ways of retaining the information. So some are taking notes while going through it with me. Others, find it more useful just to sort of be more on point and just sort of follow me around as I'm going through it. Everything that I'm talking about, sort of big and small, I always tell my clients it's going to be pointed out. So we're there as home inspectors to look at, the big ticket items, stuff that's going to cost you potentially a couple $1,000 or more. But, we're looking at everything. So I'm going to point out the smaller stuff. So I always like when a client can be there with me, because you just get more sort of bang for your buck, if you will, more information That stuff that not maybe is necessarily that important, but stuff that we want to be on top of, just as a homeowner.
Sweet. And so with that, why do you think a home inspection is important to someone that's wanting to get one done?
Yeah, so I obviously a firm believer in home inspections. It uncovers unknown issues. So typically when they're, going through the property with you, Matt, you're there maybe 30 minutes for a showing. Typically you're not deep diving into things. We're looking
No.
at, is this going to work? Is it in the budget? And so on. You know more about that than I do. So when I get there, or when we get there with the clients, it's a time now to kind of really get to know the property. So we're going to be able to have, 2.5, 3 hours typically for a standard inspection to go through the property in detail. So it uncovers unknown issues, which is going to, like we kind of talked about with the electrical, any safety concerns, any costly repairs, like if your furnace is 20 years old, obviously we want to know that. That's something that may not have been caught in like a 30-minute walkthrough, trying to decide on the property. Or, you're looking at multiple properties and all the information starts to get bundled up. So this is sort of like, this is the property we want. And now we're kind of getting to know it a little bit better. Also can be negotiation power. I kind of leave that to you. And not something I get involved in.
Yeah.
My sort of notion or my opinion on the home inspection is I want to do it for you, the client. And if that can help with negotiation, great. But I would view it more as this is the property that we want to spend our money on. This is where we want to raise our family, live in. And I want to just get to know it better. So that's sort of the way I would look at a home inspection. But certainly there can be room for negotiation if we find, stuff that we didn't know ahead of time. But that I typically leave to you because different market circumstances dictate that, as we all know. So
Yeah.
out of my range. And
So
peace of mind, right? Like just knowing what
exactly.
you're buying with confidence. Like you're spending these days sort of a minimum of $500,000 up to, $3 million or more. So you just want to make sure where you're putting your hard-earned money. Everyone kind of knows that the home is your probably biggest investment that you're ever going to make. So we just want to buy with confidence and know what we're buying. And then one of the big things I find with the home inspection is future planning. So knowing like the typical life expectancies of a roof, of a furnace, HVAC equipment, and knowing that, if the furnace is 12 years old, these days the furnace are lasting 12, 15 years, maybe a little bit more if you're lucky with proper maintenance. But typically, it's not like our parents' furnaces that were lasting like 30 years. These furnaces
exactly.
they don't last super long. So it's sort of just knowing that if my furnace is, say, 10 years old, I probably have about 5 years left, maybe. So we start planning for that, putting away some money for budgeting, That's sort of the idea.
Perfect. Yeah. And so I guess what's not included in a home inspection? Because we talk about what you do, but I mean, you can't see behind walls and all that.
Exactly. So again, kind of going back to setting the client's expectations. So we know what's covered, what we're doing, but then also what we're not doing, because I find that's where, you can get some misinformation. So specialized inspections. So anything like radon, mold, asbestos, pest control, water quality, septic, and wet inspections. So wet inspections are for any wood burning appliance. Although I do offer septic inspections, when we're there just for the home, we're just looking at a home inspection. Yeah. Certainly I can do, some information while doing it, but certainly if we're going to be doing an actual septic inspection, there's going to be an inspection agreement on that. It's also a 2.5 to 3 hour inspection. So it's not something that I would recommend skipping, but it's for the home inspection part, we're just looking at the home,
Yep.
And if you're in an area, say, similar to like Canada, where there's a lot of rock and that, radon inspection might be something that you might want to look at. So some inspectors do offer these add-on inspections. Others do not. So then you would just seek out a qualified specialist for that individual aspect of the property. And then cosmetic issues, not something that we're typically talking about in a home inspection. If the walls need to be painted and they're dirty and stuff like that, it's not something that we're really looking at. If it's major or signs of settlement, stuff like that, then obviously that would be identified. But typical cosmetic issues, drywall cracks, nail pops, and stuff like that, it's not something that we're kind of looking for.
Cool.
And it's not a code compliance inspection. So that one's important. We're not doing code inspections as, residential home inspectors. That would be something done through the city or municipality. And then concealed issues. So kind of like you said, we're not seeing behind walls. If it's full of storage, you can only see what you can see. It's a visual inspection of the home. So kind of important to remember because, as you know, homes look a lot different empty than they do lived in. So for example, like if there's a big giant scratch in the hardwood floor, but it was covered up by a huge area rug or something like that, obviously you wouldn't be able to see that. Now, all that being said, we do our best. I carry tools like a moisture meter that's going to help identify some hidden moisture if it was there. Thermal imaging cameras that I include in all my home inspections, so that lets you see any heat loss and potential water entry. So those types of tools can help us see a little bit more than just without them.
Perfect. And so how would you recommend that people get the most out of a home inspection? I know you said that you're typically there for 2.5, 3 hours. It's a long time. How do you get the most of it?
Yeah. So to get the most out of your inspection, I always say, be present, like be there, but also actually be present. So I've been on inspections where there's family involved and kids running around and stuff happening. That's totally fine. However, I think that you can get a lot more out of it if you have someone to run interference. So if it's you and your partner, I can grab one of you at least, someone running interference on the 4-year-old running around. I know I have a couple of young kids myself, so I know what it's like. So just sort of keeping that in mind, right? We're there to learn about things, get to know the property, and it's a huge investment. It's your money. So I think you want to try to be present, which also means like actually being present and involved in the inspection. And questions and take notes. So we kind of already talked about that. Excuse me. But just sort of, just sort of being involved with things, right? It's, again, we're there for you to make a knowledgeable purchase decision on the property, like to get all the information so that you can proceed with confidence. And then to get again the most out of your inspection, the final thing would be to review the inspection report prior to finalizing your conditions. So it's great to be there for sure. I would 100% recommend that. When you go to read your report, it's almost your second time through the property. So, there's a lot happening on the day of inspection. There's lots of information being thrown at you. Sometimes there's a septic inspection going on, a well inspection. You might have a contractor there. So there's a lot of information happening. So it's sort of good that once the dust settles, you take time, you get the report. We always guarantee the report within 24 hours. So then read through that inspection. I think it'll cue, because you were present, it'll kind of, cue your memory a bit that, oh yeah, that's what we were talking about. This is where that crack in the foundation was, and so on. So just sort of making sure you read through things before proceeding, I would say.
How long is your typical report, and how do you know what's important when you're reading through it?
Yeah. So my report writing software, it ranks things as like acceptable, marginal, or defective. So defective items are obviously kind of touched on it earlier, like any electrical safety items, major structural cracks in the foundation, and so on. That's obviously going to be marked in red. You'd want to deal with that first. Majority of the time, it's going to be marginal items. So it's a kind of a list of things that it's important to do. Not necessarily need to be done right away, but something that you want to be aware of. So in my reports, I typically, if the furnace is, 12, 13 years old, I'm going to mark that furnace as marginal to kind of let you know and get it into the list at the bottom of the report to kind of say, like, be aware of this. This is going to be coming due, and do your annual maintenance on it to help extend the life.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the way that report is, or my report writing is structured anyways.
Thanks. Perfect. And so after an inspection, what happens? Basically, cool, we're done. Here's the report.
Yeah, exactly. So, like
Give
I
me your
was
money.
saying, I always guarantee the report within 24 hours. It's typically sooner than that. So then you get a detailed report with pictures and the findings, and you kind of go through that typically with you potentially, and then kind of go through if there's anything that you know uh, you the buyer was uncomfortable with. We could kind of uh, look into that. Sometimes it requires further evaluation. Like if the furnace was 20 years old, my recommendation would be let's get that looked at by like a qualified HVAC contractor prior to purchase, just to make sure that it is in good, safe working order. We as home inspectors, for the furnace example, for example, we can't see the heat exchanger and we're not, HVAC technicians. So it would make sense to me to have someone who's qualified, like a specialist, come in and look at that, like an HVAC contractor. And then discuss with your agent. So discuss with you on the next steps for either repairs, renegotiation, kind of like review the property and kind of go over it with you and say, is this sort of what we looked at? Or, you and your clients, they might have looked at 4 different homes. Do we think, okay, after looking at this, is there another home that kind of fits us a little bit better? Or just proceed. And then the final one is just make an informed decision, right? So proceed with confidence. That's what we talked about. Or, you reconsider your purchase. Like if we found that, yeah, you know what, after dealing with this or going through the property and a 3-hour detailed inspection, it's not exactly what I was hoping for. There's a few bigger ticket items that we just simply don't have the money for, or we just don't want to be bothered with. Um, you could either choose to reconsider the purchase or you move forward with all the details. And then you know that, yeah, okay, the furnace is 20 years old, but I had the money set aside for that. I'm going to replace it anyways. It's not an issue for you, but you're just sort of proceeding with knowing all the information.
Perfect. And so, Steve, you do a ton of home inspections. What are some common issues that you typically find out there?
Yeah. So as you can see from this picture here, the top one, this was on probably about a three stories up, and just happened to catch him. I could hear some rustling moving around, and this is with a picture with a pole camera. So pest entry is super common. We have a tendency to allow trees to overhang our roofs, and just because we're all very busy, especially these days.
Yep.
So those trees, they grow up, and that's very easy for pests to enter your or to gain access to your roof. And here you can see where they actually chewed through the fascia board
Yep.
in there. So they can cause, obviously, you know, they leave behind their droppings and they disturb insulation. They will have, babies, so there's even more of them. So pest entry is a big one. Leaking roofs and plumbing, that's very common to get. Water is kind of our worst nightmare, I find, with any home. Being a homeowner myself as well, just managing water around your property or leaking faucets and that. Always something to stay on top of. And electrical hazards, outdated wiring, wiring done after the fact in basement and garages is a big one. And then foundation cracks and settling. It's not uncommon to get foundation cracks, especially in our climate. Again, today we said it's been, minus 20. And in a few months from now, it's going to be plus 20, plus 30. So it's very hard on concrete. We
Yep.
live in quite a climate. And so, but the bigger items are, are we getting like differential movement, horizontal cracks, settlement, where it's affecting the brick or the siding above. So structural movement is what we're looking for. That could be, I wouldn't say it's fairly common, but it's something that can come up. Um, HVAC condition, of course, typical life cycles. We talked about that already. Just sometimes, just people don't realize that these days furnaces are only around the 15-year mark. They kind of think that it's going to go 25, 30 years. So just setting that expectation.
Mhm.
And moisture entry, right? So just the simplest details of caulking around your window, if that gets left behind, because we're very busy, like we talked about, you get the right wind-driven rain, and you're going to get water entry, or you can't. So just sort of moisture entry, and that's where that tool, like I was saying, the moisture meter is a big helpful tool for us, identifying some hidden moisture or water entry. And lack of insulation. So this other picture here, that purple, blue, big void, this is actually on like a 2-year-old home.
Oh
That
boy.
was, yeah. And this is in a cathedral ceiling. So clearly that's either water entry or insulation loss. I verified that this is insulation loss by getting up there with a moisture meter, making sure that it's not actually wet.
Mhm.
So I confirmed that this is just a whole section of missing insulation. Uh, so that is probably like a 4 by 8 area. It's quite a bit of heat loss missing there. And then the pest entry we talked. So important to remember that no home is perfect. You see here at the bottom of the slide, and not even new ones. For example, like I was just saying with that insulation loss, that's on a quite expensive, relatively brand new home, and we're
Yep.
missing that insulation. So your heat is just literally going through the roof.
Mhm. Jeez. And so with that, Steve, any tips for first-time home buyers going through their first inspection? What do you got?
Yeah. So whether you, hire me or have someone else, I would say the tips that I would recommend clients ask for is ensure that the inspector is registered either with the provincial or a national association. What this ensures is that the inspector that you've hired, um, has the appropriate education and qualifications to do the job. So right now, you don't need to be licensed here in Ontario to do inspections. Anyone can be a home inspector. Um, some I'm sure are good, but it just when an inspector is part of an association, you're verifying that they have insurance, that they're properly qualified. I'm a part of CAPI, which is an inspection, a home inspectors association here in Ontario, and we're required to have annual credits to make sure that it's sort of not like the one and done. You have to continually be updating your skills, taking seminars, courses to keep your skills and knowledge relevant. Um, and then we kind of already talked about this, that the inspector carries full insurance, airs an admission. Um, Schedule the inspection at a time when you can attend. So, if it just keeps turning out that there's no times available for you to be there with your inspector, and you really that's important to you. We kind of discussed why that was important earlier. Then maybe you need to look for a different inspector. It's the idea is the inspection is for you. So to make sure that, if you want to be present, that the inspection is scheduled at a time that works for you. Um, and request that the homeowners not be present during the inspection. This can slow down the process and distract from things. So that's not always the case. Sometimes a home owner is present. Um, I'm there to work with everyone and make it a pleasurable experience for both sides. But uh, I'm hired by you. So I'm there with my clients. My information is for my clients. So we'll typically talk in the driveway first that, okay, the homeowners are here. Um, Maybe we'll keep the information to ourselves. Or sometimes I'll have clients say, no, let's get it all out there. We're going to be talking about it anyways. So I leave it up to the clients to kind of lead that discussion type thing. But typically it's best if the homeowners are not there. I know normally, Matt, when I'm working with you, the homeowners aren't typically there. I think that just makes everyone feel a little bit more comfortable. You can be a little bit more, free to look around and ask questions without maybe pressure that might, be added. And lastly, just ask the inspector about the process. Like what's the cost? Cheaper isn't always better. Thorough home inspection is going to take around 2.5 to 3 hours. If you get, when you're calling around, if someone says, "Oh no, we're in and out in an hour and a half," that might sound great for your work schedule. That's not super great for going through a home in detail, unless you're working with a team of home inspectors on your home inspection. And then we kind of touched on this and the importance of it, like the infrared camera thermal imaging, as well as the moisture meter. So the inspector, if you ask them if they have those tools and they don't, they're not required to. But it's nice if they do. And we kind of explained why with that insulation loss that we saw, and then the potential for water and moisture injury. So most home inspectors that I'm aware of, at least in my association, do have those tools readily available to kind of give you a more thorough home inspection.
Steve, I gotta ask, what's the craziest thing you've seen on a home inspection?
Oh boy, that is. I would say I've had a bat. The one that stuck out to me was I was going into an attic and there was an actual bat. As I was lifting up the hatch, there was a bat that had its claws in, hissing at me from above. Yeah, almost had to have a change of clothes on that one. A little bit nerve-wracking. That's one of them. The electrical as well. Like I can't stress that enough. It's so dangerous when homeowners try to do it themselves. Off a quick Google search, they figure they're going to do it. It might work, but it's certainly not done safe. So certainly lots and lots of electrical scariness, we'll call it.
Chaos.
Yeah. Chaos.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate the time and thanks for all your insight.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.